Friends, brothers, sisters, look at me now. The man who stands before you, second only to Pharaoh, was once called the Dreamer. I share my story not for accolades, but for one reason: to anchor your faith. My journey began with favor and a coat of many colors, symbols of my Father's deep love. This favor, however, drew not admiration, but bitter jealousy from my own kin. I was young, perhaps boastful, sharing the vivid dreams God had given me. Dreams of sheaves bowing down, of the sun, moon, and stars paying homage. These dreams were not about my ego. They were pronouncements of God's purpose for my life. Here is the first lesson I offer you. When God gives you a vision, a purpose, or a promise, do not be surprised when opposition arises from the places you least expect, even from within your own family or circle. The enemy attacks the promise, not the person. One day, while seeking my brothers in the fields, they seized me. The anger, the cold indifference in their eyes. It was a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter my very soul. They stripped me of the symbol of my Father's love, that magnificent coat, and cast me into a pit. Imagine that darkness, that utter helplessness. I cried out, but no help came. That pit, that deep, dry cistern, was the first test of my trust. You too have your pits. They are the moments of betrayal, loss, or despair where you feel abandoned by man and forgotten by God. But I tell you this, the pit is not the end of the story. It is merely a redirection. While in that earthen tomb, I had to choose bitterness or belief. I chose to believe that if God had given me the dream, no human action, not jealousy, not hatred, not even the grave-like abandonment, could negate his plan. My brothers sold me into slavery, and my world shrank from the open fields of Canaan to the confines of a camel caravan bound for Egypt. Trust in God's purpose. The moment I was sold, the clock of God's destiny started ticking in a new direction. The betrayal wasn't the final sentence. It was the mechanism that moved me from point A, Canaan, to point B, Egypt, where the true work was to be done. Your hardship may be the divine transportation system moving you toward your purpose. Hold on to that truth. I was a slave in a foreign land, stripped of my identity, but I was never stripped of my divine assignment. The slave market in Egypt was brutal, but I found myself purchased by Potiphar, a high official of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. This was not the freedom I had dreamed of, but here I learned my second great lesson. God is faithful in the mundane. Potiphar quickly noticed something different about me. Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. This success wasn't due to special skills I learned in Canaan. It was because I focused on one thing, doing my assigned duty with absolute integrity, as if I were serving God himself. I didn't complain about being a slave. I excelled at being a steward. Focus on God's goodness. You don't need a promotion to feel God's goodness. His goodness is reflected in the peace you maintain, the excellence you deliver, and the favor you experience even in the midst of constraints. Soon, Potiphar put me in charge of everything he owned. I was essentially running his entire estate. This period was a powerful training ground in administration and leadership, skills I would need later, though I couldn't possibly know it then. This elevation brought a new, more insidious kind of test: temptation. Potiphar's wife sought to lure me into sin. This was a direct attack on my purity and my character, and it was far more dangerous than the pit, or the slave caravan, because this test was internal. If I had failed in my character, the rest of God's plan would have been jeopardized, regardless of my administrative skill. My response was immediate and resolute. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? The test of character. When you face temptation, remember that sin is not just an offense against others. It is always and foremost a sin against the God who gave you the promise. My relationship with my master, even when he felt distant, was the rock upon which my integrity rested. I fled. But fleeing temptation did not save me from the consequences. I was falsely accused, and Potiphar, believing his wife, threw me into Pharaoh's prison. The isolation of that prison was profound. It felt worse than the pit. In the pit, I was abandoned. In Potiphar's house, I was favored. In prison, I was forgotten after doing the right thing. This is the hardest part of faith, when obedience leads to suffering. Embrace peace and injustice. You will face moments where you are punished for righteousness. You will be maligned for integrity. Do not let that steal your peace. Even in the deepest part of that prison, God was not inactive. The warden, just like Potiphar, saw that the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. So even as a wrongly accused prisoner, I found purpose, serving the warden, managing the prison. I practiced my trust in God not by demanding release, but by faithfully doing the work of the day. My friends, if you are currently suffering an injustice, hold fast. God's purpose is not defined by your circumstances. If He can make a prison prosper, imagine what He can do with your faithful life. It was in this prison that God prepared the stage for the next act. I was about to meet the very people who would be instrumental in my release, the cupbearer and the baker. The darkness of injustice is simply a hidden classroom for your elevation. Let us look now at the long wait that followed, the goodness of God and service. Even when you feel you have nothing to offer, God can use your specific gifts to serve others. I used my gift of interpretation, but in that moment of success, I asked the cupbearer one small thing. Remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me, and mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. And what happened? He forgot me. Completely. This is perhaps the most painful part of my story, and the most vital lesson on patience and trust. I had done the work. I had served the influential man. I had even predicted his triumphant future, a future I hoped to share. And yet, he walked free, and 2 full years passed without a word. The struggle with hope. Deferred. We often place our faith and our hope in human memory, human promises, or human timing. The cupbearer was my hope for 2 long years. When he failed, it was a test of whether my ultimate trust was in man or in God's sovereignty. I want to speak directly to those of you who feel utterly forgotten today. You served faithfully. You delivered the success. You prayed the specific prayer. And yet the person who could help you walked away, and the door slammed shut again. You are in the 2-year wait. In that silence, I learned to lean on God for peace. I realized that my release would come, not when a man remembered me, but when God's appointed time arrived. Trust in God's timing, peace. God does not operate on our schedule. The 2 years I spent waiting were not wasted time. They were the crucial time needed for me to fully mature into the man ready to handle the immense responsibility that was coming. I had to learn patience. I had to master the administration of a small prison, and I had to learn that the source of my hope was unshakable. Think about it. Had the cupbearer remembered me immediately, I might have been released and given some insignificant job in Pharaoh's court. I would have been a mere footnote. But because I waited those 2 years, the timing aligned perfectly with Pharaoh's urgent, terrifying dreams. Suddenly, no human wisdom could solve Pharaoh's problem. All the wise men, the magicians, and the counselors were stumped. Only then, when human solutions failed, did the cupbearer suddenly remember. I remember my faults today. There is a young Hebrew in the prison who interpreted my dream precisely. The elevation of the weight, the delay elevated my entrance. I wasn't just Joseph the ex-slave, Joseph the ex-steward. I was Joseph, the only man who could speak for God. Your waiting period is what prepares the stage for your extraordinary arrival. Do not resent the silence. Let us now witness the dramatic fulfillment of the dreams. It's the moment I was summoned from the dungeon to stand before Pharaoh was breathtaking. 1 hour I was a forgotten inmate. The next, I was bathed, shaved, and ushered into the most powerful court in the world. The transition was immediate and absolute. This teaches us about the speed of divine elevation. Pharaoh cut right to the chase. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Focus, shifting from self to God. My response was perhaps the most important speech I gave in my entire life, and it's a vital piece of advice for you. I immediately deflected the praise and the power. It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Always remember this principle. Never take credit for the gift God gave you. Your focus must be on Him. When opportunities come, acknowledge the divine source of your ability. This keeps your heart humble and keeps the stream of favor flowing. I interpreted the dreams. 7 years of unprecedented plenty, followed by 7 years of devastating famine. The clarity of the message was overwhelming, but I did not stop there. The knowledge of God's plan came with a practical application. I advised Pharaoh to find a wise and discreet man to oversee the collection and storage of grain, a plan of preparedness and meticulous stewardship. Pharaoh's response cemented my elevation. Can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God? In that moment, Pharaoh recognized not my Egyptian education, but the presence of the divine Spirit. He placed his signet ring on my finger, clothed me in fine linen, put a gold chain around my neck, and appointed me ruler over all the land of Egypt. Trust in God's preparation. Every painful lesson, the leadership I practiced in Potiphar's house, the integrity I maintained against temptation, the administration I perfected in prison, the patience I developed during the 2-year wait, all coalesced into that single moment. God never wastes your training. The skills you develop in obscurity are the exact tools you will need in your elevation. My first task was immense, preparing the world's greatest superpower for an unprecedented crisis. During the 7 years of plenty, I traveled the land, collecting and storing grain in cities. I had to be a master organizer, administrator, and delegator. My new family name, Zaphanath-Paneah, meant God speaks and He lives. I was now a living testament to God's providence. The famine arrived as predicted. When the people cried out for food, Pharaoh sent them to me, saying, "Go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, do." My time as a servant was over. I was now the provider, the dispenser of life-sustaining provision. This elevation was not just for me, it was for the entire region. The ultimate purpose of the dream was not Joseph's glory, but the preservation of countless lives. And soon the final, most profound part of my story would begin, as men arrived from Canaan, bowing low to request grain. Then came the day. I was standing in my court, overseeing the distribution of the world's survival, when a delegation of 10 men from Canaan was ushered in. They bowed low to the ground. It was my brothers. The very men who had thrown me into the pit were now bowing before the fulfillment of the dream, just as God had shown me 20 years prior. They did not recognize me, but I knew them immediately. This moment was the greatest test of my faith. Could I forgive? Could I let go of 20 years of pain, suffering, and injustice? My heart wrestled, but I remembered the journey. Every step, the pit, the slavery, the prison, was orchestrated not by their evil, but by God's overarching purpose. After a long, deliberate, and painful process, I revealed myself. The reunion was one of the most emotional moments of my life. My words to them are the key to unlocking true peace and goodness in your own life. Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. Genesis 50:20. The goodness of God and sovereignty. This is the capstone of my advice to you. You must distinguish between what man meant and what God intended. Human intention. My brothers meant to destroy me, to silence the dream, and to inflict evil. They are accountable for their choices. Divine intention. God meant to use their evil act as the essential first step in a master plan to save my entire family and an entire nation from death. Your peace comes when you stop focusing on the human intention, the pain, the betrayal, and start trusting in the divine intention, the purpose, the preservation. The practice of forgiveness, hope. Forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong done to you. It is about releasing the pain and trusting that God has already woven that dark thread into a beautiful, purposeful tapestry. If I had not forgiven my brothers, I would have spent my life as a prime minister who was still a prisoner of resentment. Forgiveness gave me true freedom and allowed me to finally claim the goodness God intended. My story is your hope. It is a testament that your most bitter disappointments are merely setups for your greatest divine assignments. Hold fast to your focus on God. Cultivate integrity. Practice patience in the waiting. And when the elevation comes, always give the glory back to the one who took you from the pit and placed the signet ring on your finger. May the peace and goodness of God, the ultimate director of all history, sustain you today. Go and live out your purpose, trusting every single step.